This is the last week of our mini series, DMs. And the message for today, as you all see, is about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. A lot of us can relate to that. I know I can. Where I was supposed to be leading particular groups, particular peer groups, but I allow their lifestyles. I allow those like whatever they was going through. I allow that to preach over what I was supposed to be doing, and that's something that I learned in my master's class for my urban ministry masters, where the church should not allow the gospel of the world to preach over the gospel of God, the word of God. And it doesn't mean that we say like, oh, we're better than everybody. No, like it means that we hold each other, everybody up, and are accountable for each other, knowing that like we all have sinned. It's a man. No sin is greater than the other one, and we need to like how teachers are not coddle everybody, but no, like we need to be like, hey, this is what's wrong. Let's dissect this. Hey, and then after we do that, we're gonna sit there, have a meal together, real, and be a big old family. And in the story that we're reading about today, we're talking about King David and how he was not in the right place. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And in chapter 11, 2 Samuel chapter 11, it talks about how it's in the springtime. And it's at this time when kings go off to war. They're all going off to war. But David did not go. And I don't think that I don't think that particularly led to his downfall. And we'll get into that. But as they were destroying the Ammonites, led by Joab was leading David's army. Verse 2 talks about how David, at one evening, he was up in his bed, walking around on the roof of his palace. He was probably having a great time, just like chilling. And then he looked from his roof and he saw this lady, this beautiful lady, bathing. And if you know anything about the culture back then, a lot of the bathing pools were public bathing pools. They're outside. And I'm sure they had, the pools were, some of them were on top of the houses because the sun was probably like, hey, like, they was able to dry off faster. And David was looking where his eyes should not look. And a sin, like your thoughts don't necessarily have to lead to your sin. You don't get in trouble for your thoughts. You get in trouble for the action behind your thoughts. But it's also a dangerous place because you're battling those thoughts. It's like, man, should I entice this? Should I keep on scrolling through Instagram? Try, go to the direct message. Try to see like what they up to. It's like, man, like you look cute. Like, oh. And some people, we do this. And where we see the flag, we're like, man, we see that this person is not for me, or I shouldn't be entertaining this because I know that they are married. And for David, I'm pretty sure he knew that Bathsheba was married to Uriah, but he ordered for her to come to him. And in that time and culture, I don't think she had a choice. I don't believe she did. What if she said no and she could have died, or Uriah, he could have died, or anything could have happened, like the family could have been cut off from food. And with David, he thought, like, he had this whole plan. He was like, I'm going to do this. Hey, it'll be one and done, and I'm done, right? But no, she got pregnant. And I want to segue for a second, where I saw this post from this pastor talking about protected sex outside of marriage is still unprotected sex. Even when you think you're safe, you like have a condom, like you have every safety measure, like it's still unprotected because it's not under God's covering. And that's a sin. You can come back to that narrow road. You can repent from your ways, like for David, but it's consequences. For David, his son died. His son that Bathsheba bore had died, because for him, the way he went about it is, not only did he lie, not only did he steal and covet with a man's wife, but he led him to death. And Uriah was so loyal. He was like, man, I'm not gonna go home and stay here. David was trying to get him drunk. He was like, man, why are you still here? And he was like, as he basically told him that while they're fighting for the war, like, why would he go home? Like, he basically told David to his face, like, I'm loyal to you. And in verse 22, after all of that, David sent a note to Joab, and he had Joab bring it to the front line, and he told Joab, put Uriah in the front, where all the toughest people are, so he can die. And in verse 22, it says, the messenger set out, and when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, the men overpowered us and came out against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. David told the messenger, say this to Joab, don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab. In this moment, this downfall of David, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Not only physically, but spiritually. And yes, he is a man after God's own heart. And we need to read his story in the fullest, and how David, after he was caught and after he was called out, he prayed and cried to God. And when his son died, he worshiped God, because he knew, like, hey, God is still faithful. God is still true. So in those moments where you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, do not give up hope. Just, resubmit your lives, your heart to God. Delete the DMs. Delete it. You don't need it. And go back into the direct message that God has for your life. And hey, crazy things are going to happen, and it's going to be amazing. But until next time, this is MJH Motivates. Peace.